Now in the BEDucator program, you've gotten pretty far. We are going to go over consent enforcement. I know that sounds like a super weird word combination, and I'm going to tell you why it's not. So again, my name's Momo, and this is
Lionessa.
Lionessa just joined our board, and we're going to be explaining because we have experience of using this consent enforcement process in the real world. We've done hundreds of events. Talk about what you used to do.
Oh my gosh, I used to be head of security for a very large production company here in Arizona. And then before that, I was what we call an ambassador. Basically an individual that kind of pulses the crowd, engages with audience, keeps an eye on everybody, makes sure they're having a great time, and keeps it very lively and upbeat. We dress up in costumes, shake our booty. Great job.
So we do have the experience of doing this, not just at Burning Man, placement lead for Pink Heart. Experience is there, credibility is there, and what we saw is real results of this consent enforcement process working. So why consent enforcement? When it comes to the 10 official principles of Burning Man,
What about the 11th?
there is 11 principles, correct? So we would love for Burning Man to adopt the 11th principle of enthusiastic consent, because what these principles do is they are the guiding light for our culture, because there was a problem. There's obviously a problem when it comes to consent, so we're combating that so we can have a baseline for respect. We understand consent is important to have at Burning Man, but what is consent? We're going to go over what the legal definition of consent is and what enforcement is and how those two tie in together. We're also going to teach you how you can have your camp be a safe space when you have guests come over and for your campers themselves. We're
Educator.
a BEDucator. And who's the BEDucator? You're the BEDucator. We're also going to go over the meat and potatoes of this whole program, and it's how to enforce consent as consent ambassadors and as the camp leads. You, as a BEDucator, are now writing in your position of leadership as the BEDucator itself. There's also positives to this. So there's value in being able to retain your guests and make sure that they have a positive experience. And not only guests when you're, say, throwing an event in your camp, but your camp itself. Lastly, we're going to be going over how we deal with accountability, not just with the guests in our camp, but how to keep leadership accountable as well. Lionessa, what is consent?
Not this.
Oh, okay. Understood. Teachable moment.
Teachable. So by now, you're probably asking, what exactly is consent? Well, I'm going to give you the legal definition so you know. A voluntary agreement to another's proposition. To voluntarily agree to an act or proposal of another, which may range from contracts to sexual relations.
Keywords being voluntary.
So what is enforcement? Here's the Webster's definition. To give force or strengthen. To urge with energy.
Thank you, Lionessa. How do these two things relate to each other? So if enforcement means to strengthen, and consent is a voluntary agreement to another's proposition, what consent actually is a baseline for respect. So we're not the consent police out there. We are going to make sure that everyone has that baseline of respect. So the way that I like to think about it is, say if you're driving in your car and you're following the rules of the road, it makes for a really smooth transition for you to get to your destination. If there's another car that comes in and cuts you off, that baseline of respect is now underneath what is common for the road. So those are the things that we're looking out for so we can support other people to make sure that we're having a safety third burn. Next, we're going to go over how to create a safe space. And the way that I like to think about this is what we're doing is we're building our house. So when you build your house, you're going to put furnishing inside, and then the most important part here is we're going to invite guests to come over every once in a while. So are we showing we care? We're going to go over where we can care for people, when we can care for people, and who are the people inside of our house that can be hosts to the guests that you allow inside.
Middle of our street, our house.
We need to create a safe space, right? I want to be safe to be myself, and we want to show the people that we care. So how do we create a safe space? Well, let's start with where we could do that. Where? This is our house. What's our address? In 2023, BED is located on 615 and E. Come say hey. We have 150 by 200 feet of space, so that's our finite place. And the finite time is the duration of Burning Man. So that's what we're going to focus on as Camp Bed outside of this BEDucator program. So your camp has an address and your camp has a physical space. So what kind of home did you build? Are you the type to make cock waffles like ooey gooey and you're gonna serve them at nighttime through a glory hole? Because that's a real camp out there. You put some planning into bringing out your cooking utensils, making sure that you have the batter. So one of the things that I think some of us forget that we need to put focus onto is the principles that the people stand for. So we're going to culture and foster consent because that is the basis of respect when it comes to our culture here at Burning Man and following our 11th principle of enthusiastic consent. Will your camp be known for following all 10 principles?
It's 11. Oh, no.
Oh, you're right. It is 11. What's the 11th principle?
Consent.
Consent, baby! If your house is known for following all 11 of the principles, let's say you throw a party and you're going to invite guests over into your camp. You want to welcome them into your home, right? So are you going to make them take off their shoes?
That depends. How dirty are their feet?
I don't know. Dirties are pretty dirty. Just like how there's certain home etiquettes with each and every camp, you could have different rules. Whatever your rules are, what we encourage is for you to set your boundaries at the door. Take Orgy Dome, for example. You're going to get a consent talk before you're allowed to go inside of those tents. One of the things that they have as a hard rule is no cell phones inside of there for taking pictures. You know what happens when you take a picture inside the Orgy Dome? They bust out a hammer and they will smash your phone into pieces. That's just an FYI if you think that you can take pictures in Orgy Dome.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. I mean, unless you don't care about your phone, you're not going away with those pictures. So there's a reason why there's certain rules within each of the camps if you have especially an 18 plus activation like the Orgy Dome.
It's also respect.
It's totally respect. If consent is the basis of respect, what we want to promote is the enthusiastic consent, because when you're at Burning Man, it's a large yes culture. And although we want to promote you having a great and fun time, we don't want to make somebody else feel poorly about it.
Let's just remember, though, if it's not an enthusiastic yes, it's a no.
It's a fuck no.
It is a goddamn no.
Okay, so inside of your camp, the who are your campers. And one of the things that helps make the safer space is your campmates themselves. So we have this consent enforcement process that we're going to go over. And when you know what it is, you become a consent ambassador. So who can become a consent ambassador? Literally anyone. It's just knowing the consent enforcement process, because the consent ambassador may or may not be what's called the capable individual. So that's where our camp leads, being leads, were responsible for dealing with situations that need to be escalated. Camp leads are people too. So sometimes when that person is a camp lead and they're not the capable individual, it needs to get escalated to, say, a ranger. Does that person know medical procedures? Is there a broken leg? No. We need to get them over to a med tent. Is that person tripping on acid and no one really knows how to deal with the situation, including our volunteer rangers? Get them over to Zendo. So the capable individual doesn't mean that you know everything that there is to know about consent. It does mean that you know the process when it comes to an escalation that might happen in your camp.
What about those that don't know what Zendo is?
You better learn. Okay, so a quick overview of what the consent enforcement process is. This is something that the consent ambassador, which can be anyone, can do, keeping in mind of the capable individual. So the first step in the consent enforcement process is called the hey, how's it going? What this is bystander intervention. If you see something going on, or even if you think you see something that's going on, give them a hey, how's it going?
Exactly. Never assume ill intent. You definitely want to make your presence known when you talk to these individuals, and 99% of the time is where it's going to actually end.
Thanks for that. Yeah, so if you go and give someone a hey, how's it going, and you think something hinky's going on, you might find out that actually this couple was together, or they have standing consent, which means that consent has already been granted and you just didn't know about it. So step 2 in this process, and this is the real meat and potatoes when it comes to culture curation of Burning Man, is called the teachable moment. And what the teachable moment is verbally stating boundaries, whether that's for yourself, or if you've given a hey, how's it going, you find, hey, spider senses are going off, and then the boundary needs to be verbalized in order to support another burner.
Definitely. We teach the boundary and we never shame. We also make the call on the severity, and we don't execute this twice.
So why don't we execute this twice? Because the boundary's been verbalized. You already know that you have crossed the line, and you're informed of what that line is. So the next step is removal.
Yep. It's either going to be temporary or it's going to be permanent. We support each other in this decision, and there is support on the person who needs it the most.
Thanks, Lionessa. This is a really brief overview. Again, we're going to have another video where we're going to dive into how to execute the hey, how's it going, the teachable moment, and the removal, and who is going to do each of these steps when there is an escalation within your camp. So there's a benefit to this. The whole reason why we have these standards, boundaries, and these principles when it comes to going out to Burning Man, feeling empowered enough to empower your own no, and to express yourself in a way that maybe you're pushing your own boundaries and stretching your own limits. We want you to feel safe enough to be able to do that and retract whenever you feel like things are getting too uncomfortable. When you as a camp are able to foster this environment where people feel that safe and you're known for being able to cultivate that level of safety, what you're going to get is retention. And the reason why retention is such a positive feedback for you as the camp is that they had a positive experience while being at your camp, whether it's your campmates themselves or if it's the guests that came over to whatever gatherings that you had in your home. Your people don't care how much you know until you show how much you care. This program just showed you a little bit on how you can create the world that you want to live in by fostering a community of enthusiastic consent. And what we're doing here is we're empowering the discourse, specifically with that teachable moment, which we'll get to in the next video. So in having people have a positive experience in your camp, that means that sometimes there's a bad apple, and that doesn't mean that they're a bad person. We are in a world where, let's be real, people might be overindulging in drinking, or maybe they are on psychedelics. And whenever they're driving the car and they cut somebody off, there needs to be accountability. So we do that by foreshadowing enthusiastic consent as the 11th principle in your camp. So that way, when you're going out and you're learning to play and exploring new things, that consent and enthusiastic consent is something that you as a camp actually consider, care, and have people prepared for whenever someone does swerve and get out of line. The good news is you're taking the BEDucator program, so you're going to learn how to make your camp's unique consent policy that surrounds the 11th principle of enthusiastic consent. What we're also going to provide is how to create an incident report surrounding all 11 of the principles. So that way we're holding our campmates accountable.
Do we also hold leadership accountable?
Absolutely.
Good.
I'm glad you asked. So what BED has, and you can take this into your own camp, is called the Camp Culture Lead. When there's an incident report, the BED heads, the board of directors, will read the report, and then they'll go and give a hey, how's it going to that campmate and a teachable moment where it's appropriate, and decide maybe removal needs to happen, whether temporary or permanent. So what if someone has a complaint against the board of directors? The Camp Culture Lead collects these specific incident reports and has raised their hand to make sure that the board of directors are also being held accountable.
Quick question. Can you make an anonymous incident report?
Absolutely. So if an anonymous report comes in, the Camp Culture Lead will address what the incident is about and then give the teachable moment. The one thing that we can't do with an anonymous report is check to make sure that the person who made the report is okay because the report is anonymous. The good news about this is it keeps a paper trail to make sure that leadership doesn't have multiple different reports surrounding the same issue. The whole goal here is to have a teachable moment for changed behavior. Thank you for helping build our home with us and showing other burners that we care and would look out for each other. We wanted to go over some future efforts to really make this program work within our culture. So we're going to be partnering with regionals as the Bureau of Erotic Discourse BED. So what we're looking for is to have a department lead who is a BED head, so that is a BED leader at the state level for all 50 states when it comes to regional burns. So we're taking it outside of Big Burn and we're condensing it down into the state level. We are pushing for enthusiastic consent to be the 11th official principle of Burning Man organization. We've been asking for this for a while because there's a problem. So we want to have this as an official principle to make this work easier for new burners. Last but not least, we want a BEDucator in every single camp at Burning Man. That way we can promote the principle of consent and make sure that people are having those safe spaces and encouraging their own yes enthusiastically and feeling empowered enough to say no.
Can you imagine in a city of 70,000 people having a BEDucator in each camp?
Each camp.
How safe will you feel?
Yeah, I mean, when you pass out, you could just write, hey, I belong to 615 and E, and you know that you'll be okay, and someone will get you back.
Oh, that would be great.
Yes, it would be great. So thank you in helping us create that safe space that we want. And if you need more help with this training, we have a Bed Buddy system. So reach out to us at bedburningman@gmail.com.